Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It's V, the Grill Economist, and I have with me a man who needs no introduction. It is the one and only Juan Savin. Juan Savin is here, aka my buddy W. Still not used to calling you that, but anyway.
Not,
W, Juan, what's up, buddy? How are you?
just trying to keep all the monsters in their boxes, and uh, you know, uh, W1 both work. I mean, even my closest friends only know me by one or the other. So,
Exactly.
uh, but beautiful day here on the West Coast, and just enjoying the uh, nice weather. Uh, these governors here on the West Coast are just kind of going a bit screwy. But I know that during a conference call with one of the governors, not on a coastal state, um, he made an interesting comment up in Washington. The governor there has today is the first day that they have a statewide mandatory. You have to wear a mask outside of your residence, and so the question is how compliant will the people in the broad population be with that? How accepting of that are they going to be? It was funny. Somebody sent me something where they were looking at his governorial executive letter uh, mandate for wearing masks, and they're going, "Who wrote this thing? They can't even. They don't have their syntax right. They don't know what word they're supposed to be using.
Right.
It's misspellings or whatever." And they were just mocking the whole thing. It was like, which
Yeah.
junior leaguer did this? Apart from it, whether it's constitutional at the federal level. And but this other governor says, "Well, I don't." They were asked if they were going to do the same thing, and he says, we got farmers and other workers uh, that do stuff, pretty isolated, and requiring them to do it with a mask on when there's no other people around. And besides that, the virus doesn't transmit aerially very easy. It's a contact thing, especially out in the fresh air, sunshine, stuff like that. It doesn't survive. So he was like, that just doesn't make sense. So I don't think we're going to do that. So even other governors that are totally liberal, totally, not in the Trump camp, are saying, what the governor up in Washington's done or what the mayor down here in LA has done doesn't make sense, and is, we're not going to play politics at that level for one primary reason, I would add, because the people are going to reject these political decisions that don't actually have medical merit. Walking around with a petri dish on your nose doesn't actually make sense. And people talk about, it's just a face covering. Well, that face covering, when was the last time you washed it? Oh, I wash it every day. Oh, okay. That's not everybody. I mean, uh, you got people that are wearing the same mask for 3 weeks because it's just a facade. The other thing that actually is very troubling, most people aren't aware of this. Um, the these muzzles that they put on people,
Mm.
that's what they really are. These mufflers or whatever, but they're really muzzles. There's symbology for these people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Um, it was especially for women in Europe and like that. They would put these muzzles on the women in the 1800s, 17 and 1800s, as a sign of servitude. If a woman was construed as talking too much or back talking her husband or whatever, she'd have a muzzle and she'd have to wear it for weeks or months out in public. And so they had all sorts of designer muzzles for the women to keep them shut up.
Mm.
So you look at the face masks, you look at these muzzles that the women were required to wear in public because the husband decided it, and to keep them under control. This mask thing is a sign of servitude, control, management, and
Right.
subjugation. Do
Right.
you want to be subjugated to these idiots? It does not have a sound medical reason.
No, it doesn't.
And it's actually, again, you're putting a petri dish on your nose.
Right.
And these people are grabbing their face mask, moving their face mask. Hello, what are they doing? They're grabbing the germs. They're putting it right on the door next. They're moving around, putting it on. They're wearing it for weeks at a time. It's a do-rag. Hello, those people are wearing a scarf or a do-rag, or somebody's worn out underpants on their head. Excuse me. They're not protecting you from anything. That is not a viral filter. And then even a proper mask, when you see the doctors and the nurses and everything else wearing them in a surgical environment, the reality is they're changing those masks regularly. They're changing them between rooms. They're changing them in different areas of the hospital very frequently. They're going through them like crazy. If you actually are supposed to be doing it to protect from a viral, it has to seal all the way around the mouth and nose. And that's a little different. And that's not what most people are wearing to the 99th percentile, or 90 anyway, percentile. They're not wearing true filters or
And
restrictors.
no, they're really not. They're not wearing N95 filtration masks, the real medical grade ones. They're just telling you to go. If you have a scarf lying around in your home, please put it on your nose. And it's stupid. And there's a lot of research coming out that how this is lowering immunity, because all you're doing is breathing your carbon dioxide. Look, I live in a state where you have loony left-wing nut jobs that I can't even go grocery shopping without having a mask on. So what I do is I actually wear the stupid mask, but I get the lightest one possible, right? Because it's just a symbolic covering, right? And then I pull it like where my nose is free. At least I can breathe in the fresh air, you know? At least do that. It's crazy what they're doing, bro.
Yeah, and again, it's the symbology. Well, I would go back to what is it ultimately symbolic of? We have a group, this master class, that wants to control us as a society, that thinks we need to be muzzled
Yeah.
as a people. And then it's a sign of servitude and compliance with the man. And when it doesn't actually have a sound medical reason, I mean, we could have, and may yet out in the future have, some type of event that requires us to operate at this level and to be really, really, really on top of it. And I would suspect these people have that in mind, that have been going after us out in the future. So I'm not saying we'll never have an event where these types of precautions, actions aren't warranted. But I think it's pretty suspect that this is the one. And there's still the COVID C versus COVID L aspects.
Right.
You're not even the statements aren't that you're going to stop COVID, except by people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. This is about slowing the rate of dissemination of the COVID, but just like the normal cold and flu, before it's all over, everybody's been exposed to it, and so we just didn't have an explosion of COVID cases over a matter of a few weeks that would have shut everything down. Hello, it did shut everything down anyway, where the medical system couldn't deal with the legitimate cases. So if you're actually going, within 2 years, some upper side of the 90th percentile of the population will have had COVID and been exposed to it, no matter what you do.
Right.
So with that in mind, and out into the world even, so you're just stopping an explosion that happens in just some radically tiny moment, but you're not stopping it from getting out and around. Everybody's going to have some exposure at some point in time. So again, to me, these globalists are using this, and always intend to use it. It's a pandemic to get us into a mental corner where we allow them to proceed with all of their other plans to make us a globally captured operation as a people, as a species, whatever. And they're going to manage us. It's Animal Farm on steroids. The only thing I would say to counter that, though, is the intent here was to corner President Trump
Correct.
and to force him to do things that they could say was stupid, or he didn't act fast enough, or he acted too slowly. No matter what he does, they have a response. Either you acted too slow, you acted too fast, you shut the economy down, you didn't shut the country down, you didn't protect people, you acted to protect people, and it wasn't going to make a difference. It was a catch-22 situation as far as they're concerned. From the president's side, from the people who are loyal around the president, from the military intel side, they know what the real situation is. And I would just respond, yeah, they've got the president cornered. They've got him right where he wants them.
W, you there?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, very well said. And the funny thing is this. I had some interesting conversations the other day with a few guys that are pretty up there on the financial side of things, and we had a nice little talk. And I went into detail about it on my Patreon channel and let the people know. What these morons on the left don't realize, this operation, their failed coup attempt with Russia Gate, Ukraine Gate, and then COVID, and then the race riots, they have literally lit themselves up like a Christmas tree. And everything that we did not know before in terms of their operations, in terms of how they're logistically, maintaining these operations, we know them now. We have right now, they are been able to track specific bank accounts that are coming from certain NGOs. Okay, but those NGOs those funds are landing there via offshore accounts, and we were able to trace those back. So in other words, there are some key individuals that right now they've been painted. They've all been painted right now. And I think that's what's happening, man. And on a grand scale, every single one of these targets are being painted. And what they told me is this: it's their own words. Come November, the Democrats will be decapitated.
Well, let me just build out on that for a little bit.
Yep.
First off, I think I said it here on your show, and I said it a couple of other places at the very first hours behind the scenes, and then a day or two later, I kind of let things develop. But I've been saying, both privately, especially, and publicly, that this is, these players are tied to this Muslim Brotherhood operation. The money was coming from there. For example, this guy up in Seattle, Chaz, who was, the big figurehead in this whole thing.
Simone Raz Simone.
He's got, he's supposedly just some street kid that's got a couple ideas. No.
He's got millions of dollars in assets.
Well, and where did that money come from?
UAE.
He was getting money out of Dubai. He was getting money out of players that are connected to Muslim Brotherhood. Hello.
Correct. Who's the Muslim Brotherhood? Let's follow the rabbit trail a little bit further. Who's been funding the Muslim Brotherhood? Who set those up? British intelligence.
Well, and beyond that, who in the current era was promoting and assisting Muslim Brotherhood? That was the Clintons people. That was the Mideast Arab Spring. This whole scam to get us into World War III there in Syria. It's got a lot of roots. And then even the Chaz, he wasn't an instantaneous creation. They've been grooming and promoting and setting him up, preparing him for this, for something. And they had a few options to play him into for several years, because he's sold out into this little globalist cabal. He's their creation. And so he's just one of many players. the George Floyd thing, the facts, as I mentioned on your show, I believe it was several weeks ago,
Yeah.
that whole operation there in Minneapolis, where it took place, the people in charge, how it was promoted media wise, that was far more um, prepared, orchestrated, done from a plan than people can possibly really believe at this moment in time. This didn't just happen organically. This was a pre-planned, orchestrated event. And then the other thing is, it's almost virtually unknown, and people don't realize it. We had 3 events like that out across the world. Even the situation, how the person was held by a vehicle and held down and choked and everything else, crap, you could almost overlay the videos one on top of the other in other parts of the world. And so, over a period of about a week. So you have to wonder, well, wait a minute, even there's plenty of great folks that are doing the pixel counting saying that was done in a studio. It's like the 8-foot tall Muslim Brotherhood guys assassinating people on the beach in Libya. And you go, that was done in a studio. That's not actually happening there. This is a green screen. Something's wrong here. The terrorists burning victims in Syria in a cage, and some of the beheadings, not all of them. And you go, that's a green screen. That's not a real event. Trying to bait us to get into a war in Syria.
Yeah.
And that was the stuff I was talking about way back, uh, uh, post Benghazi and like that, and saying we cannot go to war in Syria over propaganda being fed to us that's being created to move us as a country, to bait us into a war, including with Republicans being right there, or the bomb Iran bullshit, trying to get us into the next war to keep these globalists strong. And that's the genius of President Trump and the people behind him on the military intel side to manage their responses to this media onslaught, this MK Ultra programming of the masses of the public, in not in providing a response and helping the public to wake up and come up to speed to decide that they're not going to buy into this programming. And that's the masks too. That's the Antifa. What's happening in the country uh, here in the U.S. that is so critical is, and your audience really needs to think about this. My the way I see it right now, the tide is already actually turned. We're
Yes.
past low tide. And so the slack tide is past. That was weeks or a month or two ago. The tide's actually coming back in. The rising tide, all the boats are going to rise higher. This moment that we're in right now, more and more people at a very broad, basic, grassroots, organic level are their eyes are being opened up. The harder these governors push or these mayors push to force people to think a certain way, to accept their directives and it makes sense and accept their narrative, the people are at the street level, at this base level, are just not buying it. They aren't being fooled the way they were before. Their eyes are opening up. The glaze is coming off their eyes. They're rubbing the sleep out of their eyes and waking up to what's really going on. And there's nothing these people can do about it. They can rant, they can fuss, they can tell you to go back to sleep and roll over. We're tired of sleeping, we're waking up, we're getting it. It won't be universal. There's a huge, probably greater than 50% of the population that's still asleep at some level, but the momentum is going our way. And so we don't have to become more animated. It's like one of my friends, number of, operators, they were fussing about wanting to do something about this thing up in Seattle or other of these types of things. I says, no, 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 you don't have to do anything. Those people are falling under their own weight.
Yep.
They are going to self-eliminate. And the mayors, the genius of the Trump uh, group, President Trump himself, was not being allowed to be baited into some kind of a federal response. He let the governors and mayors own their
Oh yeah.
responses and lack of response and be seen for what it was. And they had to go in and pull out these, up in Seattle, they put in concrete barriers around this thing. The city did to define out this Chaz, chop zone. And like it was going to be semi-permanent. Well, then they had to come back in here the other day when the president wouldn't take the bait and send in guard troops or do some federalized response. He's letting the mayor own it. He's letting the governor own it. They had to go in and dismantle the whole thing. He didn't give them legitimacy by coming up against them. He let the mayor and the governor own it. Same thing, down in California.
Yeah.
You got locations all over the place where they're making these bizarre decisions. Yeah, you can't be outside your house without a face mask. Just like up in Washington, the governor says you can't be outside your house without a face mask. Well, bullshit. I will be watching very closely. I'm sure I'll be getting lots of calls from people telling me. In fact, I had one of them where attorney friend of mine said he had talked with other attorneys and they were looking forward to representing any client that gets attacked, written a citation. The fine in Washington State is $1,000 for being outside your house without a face mask as of today. It's not just any public place. You can't go outside your house without a face mask. Really? You're a farmer, you're working on the boat, I'm in my sub somewhere and I got to have a face mask on if I go up on deck, bullshit. So the long and short of it is that I think that is going to be short lived. It's not going to be, people are going to mock it. You'll have pockets where they abide by it, but most people are just going to reject it. It's not going to be sustainable, and you're going to have mass protests in the form of no and hell no. I'm not wearing a petri dish on my face, and I don't want to be associated with a bunch of other people that do wear it. And it'll be a politically correct or not politically correct statement. Are you politically correct? You got a face mask on. Is it actually protecting you or saving your life? No. Are you not going to be politically correct and you're going to protest? Yeah. In fact, I'm definitely not going to wear a face mask. Stick it where the sun don't shine. Where's my citation? Because there's going to be 10, 50, 100, 1,000 of us, and we're all going to get a really nice attorney, and we're going to go in and let the judge decide that he wants to do it, and we're going to, run it through the courts. And yeah, it may take some time, but I'm not paying your stupid $1,000 fucking fine.
Right.
Stick it where the sun don't shine.
Exactly.
And I think because when you have mass civil protest of this type to an overreaching action that the people don't agree with. See, the problem is they think that they own and control us, that they're our managers. No, 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 no. This is a country of the people, by the people, for the people. And there are times when you need an executive to take the helm in a real crisis, to make hard decisions, to protect the people. So if another crisis comes down the road, I'm not just going to be knee-jerk reaction and say, no, I'm not doing it. If there's real data that substantiates and it's valid, you err first on the side of caution and then make appropriate decisions. There may very well be a time when we got to shelter at home stop, and because it's life and death, everything. But the reality is this isn't it. And most of the cooking the books on the figures, the nursing home deaths and forcing people into them and putting the most fragile and vulnerable in these risky situations with COVID patients. That was criminal. And so, we as a community need to not just be ready to say that all things of this sort will forever only be a false flag, if you will, or over dramatized, overreacted to. I don't think that's true at all. We may very well have more events of this type that are more real, but I'll be saving my N95 mask for that and not this one.
Right.
And, um, uh, in this one, it is highly political. I think they've overplayed their hand. I think more and more people every day are understanding that. They're not just feeling it, they see it, they know it. And they're going to try to pull off this second wave. That's what this whole thing with the tightening down further is about. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
all idiots because there was a Trump rally and it got more people sick and la, 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 la. The reality is 90+% of the population is going to have had this in the next, within the next 2 years, no matter what you do. And it's just about slowing the rate of propagation. We've already done that. You can't kill the economy to save it. And unfortunately, that's the game right now, is to keep the economy depressed and suppressed, hoping that results in a vote against President Trump. And by the way, enjoy saying president. He enjoys hearing it. President Trump has done a great job in spite of all of this. And, people are going to vote to that effect shortly. I will say that I am going to do a presentation over at a location here over the next few days. I think Jennifer Mack's going to be publishing that, and I have something that I want to present that I think is kind of important. A way of looking at the coming up on the election. And so I hope that'll be out in the next week or so, and that people will take a listen to that and enjoy it. It's a private meeting, but when she's going to actually have access to that video and publish it. So in about a week or so, week and a half, the formula to the election. And so I hope people get a chance to listen to that. But anyway, there you go.
Now, in terms of the elections, have you heard anything on your end with your sources? I mean, you got these Democrat governors like Gavin Newsom over in California, and a few other ne'er-do-wells that want to do some sort of vote by mail thing. And now it's starting to come out that people are starting to wake up to the fact that, okay, this is really, they're trying to steal an election here, especially with the second quote unquote wave, where all these infection rates are happening, but really nobody's talking about the fatalities. Nobody talks about the death because there isn't any. W, your comments.
Well, there is some deaths,
Oh, yeah,
but
right.
it's far, 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 far less than what's been projected. And there's other
Correct.
underlying issues generally, always, that are going on too. So I will mention the president's son, McKinley's son, I believe it was, stubbed his toe during a tennis match and got an infection on his toe, and then within days died from the infection on his toe. Okay, well, then we should have no more tennis matches in public where you could get your toe bruised or ankle bruised or whatever and get an infection. Look, you can die of a lot of things.
Right.
You can have, the most bizarre things. We're not going to stop ourselves from having life. And we are going to use some level of caution. But for example, even the anti-infection creams, there's some question about that they had bacteria in the anti-infection creams, that people were rubbing bacteria on themselves,
Sure.
that were making the situation worse. To the election, how devastating is this going to be for the Democrats? And I want to talk about the Republicans in a moment also. Don't let me only talk Democrats, but the reality is the documented crimes that have occurred since President Trump was inaugurated, January 20th, 2017. The crimes by the various people, both Democrat and Republican, but especially Democrats, in order to take down President Trump, to impede his ability to do the work as president, is going to be so shocking as the arrests begin and the board begins to be cleared of those players. It's going to go so deep into the party, into the leadership and down through the ranks. It's going to be so systemic out into the grassroots, with the vote fraud and the supporting of vote fraud. And again, let me stop here for 1 second and add a bracketed statement. The number of sealed indictments in play right now, this second, across the 96 judicial districts in America, classically runs about 1,500 at any given moment. That's your baseline, and it has for the last 50 years. Little spikes here and there, 500, maybe even 1,000, but that's exceptionally rare. So a running average of 1,500 sealed indictments across the U.S. any given time, 50 years. Right now, today, this morning, the figure, I was just quoted by somebody this morning, current number, just over 180,000 sealed indictments in play this second. And of course, the reason indictments are sealed is because, like if you're going after a mob operation or a drug operation or something like that, you go to a grand jury of citizen voters, 14 to 23 jurors in a grand jury. The extras are in case somebody's kicked out later when the indictments are unsealed, and they say, well, that person shouldn't have been on the jury because they knew something or they weren't vetted this way or whatever. So you have backup jurors. So those indictments will stand. It's not a crooked prosecutor. It's not a crooked judge. It's not a crooked politician. It's citizen voters have to vote on every single indictment. And so right now, we're at 130 times.
Jeez.
Not 130%, 130 times the number of sealed indictments that's the running average over the last 50 years. Anybody that thinks that nothing's going to come of that, nothing's going to happen, it's going to be the same situation after the election it was before, just is disconnected from reality. That is this unbelievable lightning storm explosion that's about to happen, that is going to be unprecedented in U.S. history, even world history, what's coming. Most of those indictments revolve around vote fraud here in the U.S. Remember, I told you that 2 years ago, before the 2018 elections, the largest investigation of vote fraud, the largest investigation period in U.S. history occurred. Every single intelligence gathering agency and policing agency, 16 total, plus Director of National Intelligence, 17th agency, 17 agencies in total, an important number, were focused by executive order on identifying vote fraud, election fraud, foreign interference. And that's what those investigations uncovered. That's what those indictments are all about. When the hammer finally does fall, and I know it's painfully slow, and a lot of people are like, because it hasn't fallen so far, it's never going to happen. Nothing's going to come of it. All right. Let's see. You think Justice slow is justice denied. Well, if you're going after the mob and you're trying to take out the big ones, Gotti's not here anymore. He died in prison, and a lot of others.
Correct.
Um, uh, so you can talk that all you want. You're actually not living in the real world, would be my contention. Let's see what happens. Uh, and so I come back to the Democrats, V, and I want to finish this statement.
Hmm.
They are so totally sold into these positions and caught up in these indictments that I don't actually think that the Democratic Party, as we understand it, is even viable or in existence as an entity, including from the legal suits, not able to even have money to function by the time we get to the 2022 elections. I think that there will be other parties that come forward and begin to try to find out what that new party may look like.
Hmm.
And there is a valid reason for having some type of balance, oppositional parties, two wings of the bird type of thing, a couple of oars in the water. I don't actually have a problem. Companies do better when they have good, healthy, solid challengers. I remember Bernie Little and I were talking on something years ago on some hydroplane stuff, and the problem was they weren't getting enough challengers that could come in, and he liked to run his Bud boat, but it's no fun being out there and being the only boat and going fast because it's not a boat race then. So he was helping other teams with boats, with technology, with getting sponsors in there. They had the beer boats and the unlimiteds and like that were competing against each other, and made it a horse race, and they had fun, and that was part of the enjoyment of it, and it allowed them to have a measure against. And some of the boats that he helped actually won the championships and beat his boat, but it kept them all sharp and kept them, bringing in new innovations and like that. Having a faithful opposition party to be bouncing back and forth on ideas is not unhealthy. And so, not having it's like the Cold War when the wall went down. People get too full of themselves, like there's no other issue. Oh, we still had China, but people were dropping their guard and being misdirected. The reality is we have to stay sharp, and uh, we normally, if you have a good news situation and honest media, that helps to keep the politicians and people sharp to get the best interest of the American people and work on it. But we've
Right.
had a captured media. That's really central even to this presentation I'm going to do in a few days in this setting. And that's the conversation. So this moment, we don't have honest, faithful opposition bantering back and forth, exchanging ideas, honing ideas to get a sharper blade. And that's hurting us as a country. And so I do see the Democratic Party so completely decimated
Yep.
as to be almost not even in existence
Yes.
for the 2022 election. Is that a healthy thing? Not completely. I think that there's some faithful opposition that I'm not going to go after them to just tear every possible person down that might have a different viewpoint or that becomes a viable party that sees things differently. It's a conversation. If you have two spoons, one of them isn't necessary. Two forks or two knives, one of them probably isn't necessary. Um, Husbands and wives don't see things the same all the time, but the balance. One of the things out in the desert, if you only have right-handed people leading you through the desert, you're going to go in circles. So one of the things about desert warfare is you'll put a right and left-handed person at the front of the line if you're working at night, and you're not really paying attention to stars, something like that. Help keep going in a straight line. That's not wrong. We need that, you know, faithful other viewpoint to challenge us to make our case better, and to have to think again at various times, have I also thought these other things? So I don't reject that just out of hand. It's not all right all the time and we know exactly what to do all the time type of thing. That being said, the Republicans have failed completely to get leadership in place
Yes.
to lead us correctly. And remember, it was Republican leadership, in fact, old school leadership, that said never Trump, and were very disrespectful. And uh, uh, George H.W. Bush with the chopping at the neck thing and all that.
Hmm.
Very disrespectful. They'd vote for Clinton before they'd vote for President Trump.
Of course.
Never Trumpers. There's a serious problem here, and so there, Lindsey Graham waiting until the word had come down that arrest warrants were being processed, and then suddenly the next morning, well, we're going to do Senate hearings, and we're going to see who else we got to call, and then they're going to call 50 people here when they come back from the recess, trying to delay again past the elections so that those people that are being called in for Senate questioning aren't being arrested first and then having to be processed from federal jail cells and stuff like that. So leave them in the open until we get through these hearings, doing anything they can for optics to delay things. Um, uh, okay, well, let them play that game. But those Republicans that are siding with the globalists, that are siding with the Democrats, that are part of stopping justice from being served here for the crimes against the American people, for not allowing our elected president and the people around them to do their job that we elected them to do, those Republicans that are playing that game are going to pay the price too.
Yes, they are.
And so the Republican Party is not going to be the same party in large measure at 2022 either.
No.
It is going to go further right, and is going to be more Trump compliant.
Yep.
Or,
More. It's going to have more of a nationalist libertarian slant.
well, yes, a classic libertarian, by
Yep.
the way, not the current way that people
No.
interpret libertarian. The
Correct.
only thing I would say is that that then becomes the job of people at the street level to not allow anybody to then portray us as national right to a Nazi theme, because that's not actually what we're doing.
And here's
I
the
would say we're
kicker.
moving further to center, not further to the extreme.
Exactly correct. And here's the kicker: the amount of minorities that will be represented in the new remade GOP that's going to be nationalistic, that's going to be classical libertarian, is going to be outstanding. No one's going to look at it and be like, okay, people don't realize, man, the narrative has completely failed. When you get out of the inner doldrum cities that are dominated and controlled by these Democrats, the narrative has failed with these Democrats. It's failing very quickly, even in the Black and Hispanic communities. It's coming apart very rapidly.
Well, okay, that's a good segue. Let me give you this last thing, because we only have a few minutes left and I don't want to miss this. This is a very important point.
Go for
And
it.
it's specific to your audience, V. So again, in large measure, your audience are people that are trying to look at the investment world, their retirement portfolios, what should we be doing, for our currencies or Bitcoin or other cryptos, how should we be thinking? And so, how does all of this affect the way you conduct your business, financial, personal retirement affairs? I would, I'll make the broad statement that it's clear already, and multiple players are saying this in oppositional places. From the Chinese standpoint, they have now just really literally in the last couple of weeks, no matter what is said publicly, behind the scenes, the key players have come to a point of understanding that President Trump will remain President Trump post-election. That there's at this point no viable mechanism that is going to field a candidate or an event that would derail President Trump and the Trump presidency, the Trump core group moving forward. So they have already resigned themselves to the idea of a second term for President Trump. In fact, part of what they see coming is that it's going to be such a decisive win that it will be with the largest percentage of electoral votes for President Trump of any election in U.S. history, which then becomes what? A mandate. Additionally, the influx of new Republicans, young Republicans that aren't the bought and paid for old Republicans is going to be pretty large. And more importantly, and this is the thing that people don't understand, a lot of times you get new politicians that come on the scene, both Democrat and Republican, and they come in with a Mr. Chips goes to Washington kind of a mentality. They're going to, with the best ideals, hopes, and dreams, and the machine gets a hold of them. They become captured, sold out. If they want to get a better office location, they got to play the game right. The reality is those players that have always managed those news people, got them under their thumb, worked them into a corner to get the next election win. Those people are going to be under criminal charges. Most of them are going to be arrested. They're going to be at least under a very dark cloud and not very viable to wield any weight during that period after the election and during the next term after the new Congress is seated. We're in the 116th Congress. That'll be the 117th Congress. 17 again is a very important number. And I think that's going to be the Trump Q number. But within that mindset, they're not going to be able to move freely or direct these new congressional members to push the narrative, to push the votes, the politics, etc., to control it for a globalist perspective. What's going to be the context of all this is this post-COVID moment. Picture where we're at with the COVID thing, the delay, the derailment, the cost inefficiency, industrial activity is similar to what you would have in a world war. If they were bombing us and we were bombing them and the population's not being productive and the plants are down and the infrastructure's not working right and supplies aren't getting to do things, etc., we're in a world at war type of a moment, actually globally, but especially here in the United States. So how do you get the world going again? After World War II, even before World War II was actually over, you had the Yalta talks where, Churchill, Stalin, Roosevelt are meeting and discussing what that post-war environment's going to look like, and this rebuilding, and who's going to pay what, and who's going to support what, and what's going to be allowed to be the value of gold, for example, as a base for the monetization of this rebuild, the printing of currency and the pumping it out to keep the population going. What's going to happen immediately after the election is there's going to be what I've termed, and others around me have termed, what amounts to a Yalta II. And when that happens exactly, hasn't been decided yet, but it will be decided probably long before the election's over, as it becomes more and more apparent to the various players what the outcome of the election is going to be. Then it's going to pivot and go to, and how are we, once Berlin is down, because the inevitable is just a matter of time now. Once this faction, this cabal in the U.S. is essentially under siege completely, and many of them are now going into prisoner of war camps, if you will, detainment, pending some type of legal disposition for their crimes of treason, in stopping America for this 4 years, not allowing us to have this president. Those are real crimes. In that environment, with that in mind, we're going to have a coming of the minds that may or may not include China, depending on how China decides to conduct themselves. That will probably almost certainly involve, at the very least, Russia and potentially other governments. The Brits may or may not choose to be involved, because they're at the core of this attack on President Trump and these never Trumpers, whether people understand that or not. We are fighting the second revolution. The Brits are behind a lot of this mischief. And the City of London, which is its own city-state, just like the Vatican and Washington, D.C. are city-states. They're globalist operations. People don't understand that. They need to grow up, wake up, learn. But this post-COVID rebuilding, these agreements that we decide to operate under coming into this second term of the Trump presidency, thank God, please, will be the basis on which money has certain value, international trade value, monetary instruments, the markets, everything will be based off that. And I actually did the work. I hadn't even told you this.
W there? W there? Come in. Did they take us down again? W, come in. W, come in. Okay, I'm still live. Okay. All right. We're just waiting for W to come in. Folks, if you don't know already, you got to figure this out, that last time W was on, they literally took us down. I mean, we were live and they just cut our feed live, and we were done. It was crazy. And they went ahead and they erased the entire interview. Luckily, I had it simulcasted and hold on, he's coming back. Hey, buddy.
Hey, I don't know what happened there. I didn't do anything.
I don't know what happened. Luckily, it's not like last time where they cut us when we were live and then deleted the video.
Yeah. So let me just finish this.
So
thought
you're
real
saying,
quick.
go ahead and finish up.
In this post-COVID environment, there's going to be a number of people keep wanting to say reset, and they want to talk about Gasara and Nasara and all that stuff. That's really not an accurate portrayal of what's going on here, and that's the other guy's game. That was their plan. We're not playing their game here. There may be aspects where we use stuff that they had in play in a jiu-jitsu type of a manner to use their energy to our advantage, but we're not playing their game. This administration is not playing that game. So even to the terms that they're using, we're not playing their game. So don't ask me these stupid questions. This is a new environment of a type that they didn't plan on and they don't control. And they never thought Hillary would lose. They never thought that they couldn't get a Biden in there. And the reality is they don't have viable options except melt the world, burn it all down. And that's not going to happen for them either at this point in time. And so looking at that, what's this post-COVID, post-World War III or IV, as I would say it's IV, because we already won World War III when we took the wall down. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. They're gone. In this post-World War IV COVID environment, what's that going to look like? There's a lot of things there that will actually favor your investors if you understand the nature of it. But the short version is you're going to have a radically higher stock market value. Yes, they're going to have to reinflate the dollar and other currencies, and the metals are going to become less suppressed as the paper suppression is lifted. There's going to be a different environment, but don't, keep your powder dry. Relax. We haven't even got through this. We have to get through the election. You can't take your eyes off the prize. We aren't playing the plays 5 plays down in time here. We have to win this play. The election isn't over.
Right.
The direction is excellent. It's set. We're doing great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's get this done. But knowing and anticipating with this second Trump term in his presidency, and the fact that these restraints are taken off, that he is able to do things that he would have otherwise done. Look at what happened early on in the first term of a Trump presidency, and then imagine that all of the damaging players and their machinations are now eliminated, incarcerated, taken off the board. What would this look like without those, and with a world that itself is on the ropes, and we as Americans with the right leader and leaders and a new Congress and piss and vinegar? And by the way, you know what? All of you in this audience are still here. For all of the horrible things that were said, you're going to be starving, you're not going to have enough toilet paper, your butts are clean and your mouths are fed. Come on, take a breath. Nobody's dying here. Let's get on with the program, and we're going to do just fine. From a business standpoint, I've said myself as a patriot that even though I'd rather just kind of relax, I think there's a certain patriotic duty to engage and be part of the build out. And I'll have some fun doing it. I wasn't planning on it, but it's going to be a very fun environment.
Yeah.
And with a lot of these restraints and annoyances themselves stewing in their own juices, in pits of their own design, that which they had planned for us to hang us by a petard, they're going to be hoisted on their own petard. This is a Purim moment. I did the Purim for Patriots presentations, and if you haven't listened to those, you should. Biblical over at Jennifer Mack, and Purim for Patriots over at Space Shot 76. This is that moment. Your people here in this audience, if you want to be investing intelligently, investing in yourself, investing in this bright future for us as a nation, and then out into the world, we will be that shining city on a hill, if you will, because I think we come through this the best because we have the right leadership and we have an understanding of it, and we're clearing the decks here. Others are going to be attracted to do business with us because we will become viable again faster than anybody else. China's got all sorts of problems. They got a dam. Their biggest dam in China right now is under threat of collapse.
Yeah.
You could lose millions downstream of it. They've got 10 more days of rain ahead of them right now. And the dam is on a, butter knife. It's, if that was to go down, it'll be the biggest story in the world for quite some time. So how much of a threat are they really? They've got real economic problems there, and they've got their own deep state there. And I'll be talking about that in another presentation in a few weeks.
Absolutely.
Over at Space Shot 76.
We're at the end of the show. And I have a hard stop coming up right now. I got another institutional call jumping up that I got to take care of.
Yep.
Dude, thank you so much for being on, my man. And next time you come back on, let's talk about some deep states that are in that are in the city of London, that are in Beijing, and other parts of the world, and get into that and how that connects to the operations that are here.
Yep.
All right,
Will
brother.
do.
Thank you so much. God bless you. I know you got to get back into your Cold War submarine and sail off into parts unknown. And folks, thank you all for listening. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. With that being said, we're over and out.